Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our course preview for this week's Travelers Championship. Gonna break down TPC River Highlands, everything you need to know about this venue to go out there, get your research started, whether it's for DFS or over there for the outright betting side, to go out there and make some of your top plays. So a lot to talk about. Gonna really try and condense this one down and just give you guys all the info you need. Let's go ahead and get this thing started. TPC River Highlands is going to be a whole lot different than what we had at Pinehurst. This is much more typical of what we'd see on the PGA Tour. They've got some 4-inch rough out there. There was no rough around Pinehurst. Plenty of water hazards around TPC River Highlands, and a winning score that's likely going to be in that 15 to 20 under par range. And while TPC River Highlands has undergone a few renovations since the last time we saw it, about 6 holes that are going to be slightly harder this time around, it's likely not going to change very much in terms of your character. So in terms of giving you some course specs out here, we've got a par 70, about 6,800 yards, a little bit over that. You can see with the course yardage, it is originally a Pete Dye design, a Bobby Weed redesign back there in 1989. 1800s would be quite something there. But this golf course is all about the accuracy off the tee. This is a place where you have to keep it out of the water, and even if you're missing fairways and in that 4-inch long Kentucky bluegrass, you're going to have a lot of problems. The greens here are only about 5,000 square foot, and when you're trying to go for them into over a water hazard, it's really nice to not have to hack out of that rough. And also when you're trying to hold specific sections of the green to go out there, make birdies, get to 15, 20 under par, you have to be under control of your golf ball. So this is a ball striker's venue. You've seen that in some of your champions at this event. Not all of them are hyper accurate players. You've had some superstars win here, like what you had with Dustin Johnson winning. I mean, even last year's championship, Keegan Bradley isn't necessarily known for hitting a bunch of fairways. But what you do see with a lot of those players is tee to green prowess. Their approach play, their around the green play is absolutely top notch. And when you have a signature type of field like we have this week, that is going to be an absolute necessity. So in terms of your agronomy, it is bent POA on the greens. It's mostly that Kentucky bluegrass elsewhere. So you can see the bent POA mix is for most of the short grass around this golf course, but the rough is that bluegrass fescue that I was mentioning, where it's at least 4 inches, and they have it as 4+ this year. So I'm imagining that the fescue might be a little bit more in play this time around. Perhaps that's part of the competitive enhancements that they've gone through here since 2023. I'm excited to see what they have in store for us. In terms of our averages over the last 3 years, we're over here on Bet the Number, which of course is a great database for all of you guys to use for all of your PGA DFS and outright needs. And on here we have the last 3 years selected. So we're going to get a pretty good sample size of what to expect around the Travelers, which is not nearly the test of what we had at Pinehurst, like I was saying before. Your fairway average, higher than your tour average, about 5% higher, in fact, out there per round. Your green regulation average, also about 5% higher than what you're used to seeing. So your fairways, relatively large. Now they might be a little bit more narrow this time around with some of those holes that are going to change, but your green and regulation percentage is always pretty high around here because of the receptive nature of the golf course. This isn't typically a firm and fast venue, especially with the placement on the schedule. It's not the time of year where you're going to get real firm and fast conditions up there in the Northeast. So despite only having about 5,000 square foot greens, that's what we had over here. If you saw that on the GCSAA page, you have a really high green and regulation percentage. And same thing about the fairways. The fairways are about average in terms of size, maybe slightly above average in a few cases, but you still have plenty of them hit because of the softer conditions. With that being said, scrambling is about tour average, 57% right there. Your 3-putt percentage is slightly lower than your tour average, but not all that far off. The result of all of that is you make more birdies per round at this golf course, and you make slightly less bogeys per round at this golf course. The thing that's not incorporated though over here with the bogeys per round are the doubles and triples that come into play with all the water hazards around this course. Something that we didn't mention before is that there are 5 holes with water in play, but unlike some golf courses where the water's kind of out of the hole, it's not really a key component of the design of each hole. All 5 of the holes that have water here are absolutely diabolical. They're in the perfect spot to go out there and really challenge these players, and particularly towards the backside, the Bermuda Triangle, which is an infamously hard section in this golf course. Water is in play for, I believe, all 3 of those holes. So it's a key part of this golf course. A long rough is the other aspect that these players are going to face, and it's quite a different golf course than what we had at Pinehurst. I think that Pinehurst really favored your bombers, your elite tier ball strikers. This week we still want some tee to green play, but I think it opens it up to your non-bombers. I think it opens it up to your players that are more precise, and you've seen that with your champions. We've had guys like Ches Reavie win here before. Even a Keegan Bradley, I wouldn't really call him an elite, off the tee player by any means. Zach Blair finished second. Brian Harmon finished third. Look at that. Ches Reavie, who's won this event before, right? Finished in fourth there last year. It's not a surprise that those kind of players show up here. So let's go hole by hole, give you guys an idea of what these players are facing in terms of shot selection. What you'll notice here when we go hole by hole is that there's going to be a lot of layup holes off the tee and a lot of mid irons into green. So first off, hole number one, handshake of a hole, about a 430-yard par 4. So mid-length hole, maybe an 8-9 iron in if you lay up off the tee, but pretty standard stuff. You can see that there's shaved off fairway areas where you'll have to hit chip shots. You've got bunkers around the green, also some of that deep 4-inch rough, and I like the variety around this golf course. It's not going to be the same kind of shot that you see at some courses where it's just rough around the green. It's not going to be like a Pinehurst where there's no rough mixed in. It's a pretty good test of golf, and like I said, pretty typical of what we see on the PGA Tour. Hole 2 is 344 yards. It is potentially drivable, even though it does play way uphill. So most players will take a stand back. Because it is uphill, it's a lot harder to reach than you'd probably expect for 344. But if they do move up the tee box, you may see a player like Rory take a hack at that green, but still just a positional par 4 for most players and a wedge in there for sure. Hole 3 is 428, another mid-length par 4, just like hole number 1, and not much that has to be said. The design here is pretty straightforward. There's not that much that's going on. Not that I think it's a poor golf course. I just don't think it asks you that many questions. I mean, you're going to hit a lot of mid-irons. You'll see that as well. The mid-iron profile here from 125 to 175 is a majority of your iron shots. In fact, it's almost every iron shot out here. Hole 4 is 487 yards. It's one of the few chances that you might have to hit a long iron into a green, but if you are a bomber, you can take it over this corner and gobble off a lot of that yardage. So if you are a longer player, this is one where you get that distinct advantage, and if you can hold the short stuff, you might even have a short iron in. Hole 5 is 230, so longer par 3. I have to say the par 3s around this course are some of the most difficult holes that they have on property. And just like a lot of the other par 4s, you can see that there's a variety around the green shots that you may have to hit. Hole 6 is 585, so it's your first par 5. It is reachable in 2 by pretty much every player in the field. The off the tee shot is wide open. That's the one reason why I think this plays so easy, and it's a birdie look for most players. And you absolutely have to be birdieing this pretty much all 4 days. 7 is 446, another mid-length par 4. It's going to put you something around 150 yards in. So once again, in that 125 to 175 yard bucket. 208 yards for the next hole. This is a par 3, of course. A little bit of water in front, but unless it's a front pin location, is probably not in play. 9 is 403 yards. This is a layup hole for most players, and this could be one of the holes that's changed. I'm not sure all the holes that they've made the changes on. They've been pretty quiet about the stuff that they've enhanced on the golf course. But you'll see here that most players will take it to the corner and leave themselves about 130, maybe 140 yards in. 10 is 462, another mid-length par 4. If you're starting on this side of the golf course, it's still a birdie look, but it's a much harder tee shot than I feel like a lot of the ones on the front. You don't have a lot of overhanging limbs on that front side. In hole 10, you've got this forest to the right. So you'll see a lot of players starting out their tournament missing to the left, but still mid-length par 4, not all that difficult. As long as you're not missing in a crazy spot, of course. 11 is 158, so this is the shortest par 3 on property, probably one that you want to make a birdie on. 12 is 413, so another mid-length par 4. You're going to see a lot of players take less than driver here, as you're going to have a wedge pretty much no matter what you hit. 13 is 534, so also very reachable, but this par 5 has more risk involved. You've got the water to the right, so unlike the other par 5 that is wide open, you don't even have fairway bunkers there. This one has water and fairway bunkers down the left, and for your second shot, you've got a little retention lake to worry about as well. 14 is 418, another one of these par 4s that I don't really have much to say about. 15 is 295, so this is a drivable par 4. This is one that you've probably seen in video games 1,000 times. Everything runs from right to left here down towards this lake. So if you hit a tee shot that is running a little bit too hot over here, you could very well end up in that water hazard. Most players will take driver up here, just try and hit it just in front of the green, maybe just to the right of the green, and get up and down for a birdie. 16 is 173, so this is another one of the shorter par 4s, but the water here is much more in play than what you had with the other one with the water in front. 17 is 424. This is another leg of that Bermuda Triangle. This is maybe the toughest leg of all of it because you've got the water in the right down the tee shot, which makes a lot of people miss left. And if you do, this rough is extremely gnarly over there. And then your second shot becomes almost impossible. And then finally, hole 18 is 444. It's your finishing hole here. It's, I'd say, adequate for a finishing hole, but not maybe as epic as some of the other ones on tour. So it's a pretty mid-length par 4. You had Spieth, right, holding out of this bunker, which was pretty memorable out there when he won this for the first time. But outside of that, I mean, good amphitheater. You're going to have a lot of fans up there on the hill, but from the design perspective, there are harder holes out there. So it's not like it's the most difficult hole out there. It's not like it's a for sure birdie look like you have with some par 5s to finish an event, but I like the amphitheater concept that they're going with here, and some pretty good history there as well with some pretty epic shots. And now that we've seen the golf course, let's talk about what I'm using to identify my top plays. Probably the most important section of this video. So the main thing that we got here in Bet the Number, which of course, again, great resource for all of your golf data. Use code Gsluke when you're signing up for a free trial and discount off any membership, by the way. But the number one thing that they added on top of just your regular shots gained categories is they have this 120 to 180 range. And I completely agree. I mean, you've got 3 of your par 3s in that range. Almost all of your par 4s outside of the 2 quote unquote drivable par 4s are going to be in that 120 to 180 range. And while you're going to have a few long irons, specifically the par 5s, maybe 1 or 2 of the long par 4s. You also have the 1 really long par 3 too, which isn't going to be in this iron range. But a solid 10 to 11 shots out of your 18 round to round, maybe even more than that, depending on pin locations and tee boxes, are going to be in this 120 to 180. So I like what they're doing here with trying to pull those stats. And just to give you an idea of some of the best players in that proximity bucket, which is a combination of a few different proximity buckets, you'd have Scotty number 1, no surprise there, but Wyndham Clark, who maybe hasn't been as sharp recently with the irons as you'd expect. So kind of surprising to see him up there at number 2, but definitely helps him out there from the data point. You've got Benny Ann, Kurt Kitayama, Corey Connors also ranking top 5 in that category. Just outside the top 5, 6 through 10 would be Tom Hoagie, Sepp Straka, Adam Schenk, Seamus Power, and Matthew Pavon. So a lot of players that are doing it with that mid-iron range. And in terms of players that are struggling there, because it's not a super big field, right? It's a signature event, so everyone in the field's pretty good. You can look at some of the slackers, and some of the slackers would include a Billy Horschel there, Brian Harman, who's had a lot of success here, so I don't know if I would hold that one against Harman all that much. Maybe that's more of a recent form thing than it is a course fit thing with Brian Harman there. But you've got Eric Cole struggling with the mid-irons, Max Homa not doing his best from 120 to 180, Tony Finau, Adam Hadwin, and Brendan Todd are all players that you might want to, look into once or twice before you go out there and consider playing. The other key stat that I want to look at that they don't have on here would be driving accuracy. So what I'm going to do is go over here, show you guys how to add a stat over here to your custom model. Super simple, super straightforward to do. Go over here, you can hit driving accuracy percentage. Now I'm going to put this at 7 and put this at 1 just so that we can add it to the board here. And I think it defaults to, the last 36 rounds, which is pretty accurate for what we can do with this model here. And I'm going to look at driving accuracy percentage because with that long rough, that fescue, that's going to be even more gnarly this year. With the fact that these greens, the fairways in general might be tighter with the competitive enhancements that I talked about before, I think that driving accuracy is already important here. You've seen it correlated to top 5s and top 10s. Wins, you've had some bombers win here, but still, especially top 5, top 10s, have been a lot of your more accurate players. Let's take a look at that category. So we've got Colin Morikawa towards the top, Sepp Straka number 2, Russell Henley number 3, of course, coming in off a top finish at the US Open. So coming in with a lot of momentum there with Russell Henley, Brendan Todd, an accuracy guy, a lot of players we'd expect to see here, right? Fleetwood, Glover, Siwoo, Eckert, all players that we know are accurate. I guess the real X factor here would be to take that and pair it up with that mid-iron success. And really the one player that stands out, I guess there's one or two that we'll point out, but Sepp Straka is the elite in both categories. He's dark green over there from 120 to 180, and he's our number 2 in driving accuracy. If there was a golf course that was built for Sepp Straka's game, it's this and it's PGA National. So obviously agronomy, a huge difference between those two venues, different time of year, so they play a little bit differently. But from the ball striking perspective, there's a lot of water at PGA National. There's a lot of risk and reward there. Same thing over here at the Travelers. It feels like a pretty good Sepp Straka week. On top of that, we've got Scotty checking both boxes. Not a surprise there. But Tom Hoge, a player that's above average when it comes to his driving accuracy, and was another one of those poppers with the mid irons. To go down and try and find a few more. So if we're going to say Shane Lowry kind of checks both boxes, JT Poston is at least adequate in both. You got Siwoo Kim, Lucas Glover, I would say are both pretty adequate in both categories. Between the mid irons and then those driving accuracy, that would be the main thing I'm looking at for the ball striking. In terms of your putting, I think putting matters at this sort of event, but we haven't had that bent POA surface much in 2024. So if you're trying to find surface stats, like agronomy stats, you can look at a player's baseline historically. I think career baseline is in play for this kind of week, but if you're going on a site like Bet the Number, different databases, and pulling in recent form, we're unfortunately not going to have that to compare to. So if we just look at regular old shots gained putting, which matters at this golf course, especially when it's playing easier and it's playing like more of a birdie fest, you've had a lot of these putting first type of players show up, kind of like Denny McCarthy, for example. He finished in 7th here last year. I think Mackenzie Hughes has a few decent finishes here as well. Like you can see 3rd place in 2020. These putting first players are also going to be in play. And once again, just like the other categories, ideally we want them to check all 3. And it's going to be very rare for a player to check all 3 categories that we've mentioned. But if they can check at least 2 of the 3 boxes, are going to be somebody that I'm looking at. So you can see Denny up there. He checks the putting box. He's okay with the irons and the driving accuracy. So definitely somebody that's in play for me this week. You can say the same exact thing about Mackenzie Hughes. Xander Schauffele, same thing too, but he's an elite tier player. So I don't know if that really matters all that much. We kind of expect that from Xander. Harris English, a winner at this golf course before. You can see he's a great putter, but also pretty decent from that driving accuracy. So he checks 2 of the boxes. Good to see that a winner would check those checklists for us. So we've got Thomas Dietrich. He's he's a good putter, but doesn't really check the other 2 boxes for us. Jason Day, decent driving accuracy. How's his course history been? He's at least got 2 top 10s over his last 5 seasons. A few other elite tier putters. You've got Bazainhout, who I know is going to be popular this week. Unfortunately, has 2 missed cuts at this event. You've got Russell Henley, who's also going to be extremely chalky here, who doesn't have better than a T19 at this golf course. So a few of the guys that I think are going to be extremely popular this week, a lot of because of their form, also just the course fit. I don't think I'm going to be the only one looking at mid irons or your driving accuracy. I think that's probably going to be the most chalky narrative for this week, but it's the one that's correct, right? We've seen this golf course. We kind of know what to expect from it. But Bazainhout and guys like Russell Henley are going to be like 25% owned this week. I mean, I would be surprised if they weren't some of the most mega chalky players that we have. So for DFS, we're going to have to think about it from the game theory angle. But if you're betting top 10s, top 20s, or outrights, these players are totally fine. They make sense. They fit the golf course. So that's why they're going to get all that attention. Brian Harmon's a great putter, also an elite tier driving guy, so he checks 2 of the boxes. So though his mid irons haven't been that good this year, he does at least give us 2/3 of what we're looking for. Matt Fitzpatrick checks at least 2 of the 3. I'd say even the iron play there as a dark gray, which is around average, isn't all that terrible. Ludwig is an absolute stud. He'll always be up there. Look at this. Ben Griffin, maybe not the most accurate player as he's changed to the Max Fly golf ball. He's playing a low spin ball that goes a lot further now. Ben Griffin, harder to control though. That's the issue with using that sort of golf ball. He is a really good putter and really good with the mid irons though. So definitely a few things to keep an eye on. Outside of that, you can look at your normal shots gained approach. I think that's always in play. Normal shots gained off the tee matters. You could still bomb and gouge this to death if you want to. It's just maybe not the optimal strategy out there. All of that's going to be in play, but I think the most important things, the most interesting things to point out were those mid irons, was the driving accuracy percentage, and then maybe that shots gained putting, because I think out of the regular shots gained categories, that putting is probably the most correlated to success this week. And now let's quickly go through some comps. So first off, we got the FedEx St. Jude Championship. It's TPC Southwind, so another TPC venue. A lot of similarities between the TPC courses, if we're being honest. A par 70 and a shorter golf course with water on it. So the agronomy is a little bit different. It is Bermuda from tip to toe over there. It's that Benpoa mix this week, so they've got that main difference. But from the ball striking perspective, a lot of similarities. And if we take a look at some of the leaderboards, it's a lot of players that we looked through in our key stats. Gsluke, of course, a winner, was somebody that was checking multiple boxes. Hatchacantley, Tommy Fleetwood, a very accurate player that is deadly with the mid-irons. And if we go back to the year before that, Sepp Straka finished in second. Look at that. Brian Harmon, Lucas Glover again going out there and showing up. So these shorter tracks that are more about the precision usually have very correlated leaderboards. Normally we see the same kind of guys showing up. I mean, even Matt Fitzpatrick kind of fits the bill for this kind of golf course. And if we go to the year before that, it's a lot of the shorter plotter type of players. I mean, Abraham Answer, if you guys weren't familiar with his game before he went to Live, one of the most accurate players on tour, very short off the tee, but deadly with those mid irons. So definitely supports that narrative. They've got guys like Hideki, Daniel Berger that played well at that golf course, all worth taking a look at this week. Next up, we're going to take a look at the PGA National. So we're going to take a look at the Honda Classic, Cognizant Classic, as they call it now, which is a longer course. It is a par 71 now down there in Florida. But what I like is that it forces you to lay up quite a bit off the tee, and it's about being deadly with the mid-irons. Now, maybe a slightly longer approach profile over there at the Cognizant Classic than what we're going to have for this golf tournament, but in terms of its demands, it's a lot of the same between these two venues. And if we take a look at the guys that have played well here, Austin Eckroat, another accurate player that is good with the mid-irons. You had guys like Shane Lowry that were showing up in our key stats. We go to the year before this, which I think the Cognizant Classic was maybe an easier version of this. So if we go back to the actual Honda version, and we can bring up some of those leaderboards, but Sepp Straka, somebody who won at this golf course, right? Eric Cole, somebody that's played pretty well at this golf course, right? We take him at these more positional sort of venues. These are the kind of key stats that I'm trying to look at. So we'll get this to load here in a second, but there are some differences as you'd expect. But Chris Kirk won this, right? There's not many courses where Chris Kirk could win. Shane Lowry showing up again. There's Sepp Straka, as I mentioned, still finishing in 5th just last year. But then Sepp winning, there's Shane Lowry in 2nd. Kitayama, Berger showing up at another positional golf course. There's Chris Kirk there. Then the year before that is the year that Matt Jones ended up winning. You had Russell Henley showing up there. So once again, another reason that he's going to be chalky this week. You've got Denny McCarthy and tied for 3rd, so on and so forth. So another track that I really like as a comparison. And then the other one we're going to do is the 3M Open. So what I like about the 3M Open for a comparison is it has plenty of water in play. Obviously up there in Minnesota, there's so many lakes up that way. But another course where you don't have to be a bomber to be, a solid player there. You can be a bomber. You've seen bombers have success at the 3M Open. But we have had guys like JT Poston play well. Martin Laird, Kevin Streelman still show up. But then also the Lee Hodges, that's a little bit longer. Right, Tony Finau that finished in 7th back there last year. Year before that, it was Tony Finau winning this event. So just like DJ has won the Travelers before, just like Ches Reavie has gone out there and won the Travelers before, we kind of want our comps to be courses where you don't have to be one sort of player, right? You can be a bomber. You can be a shorter player. The thing you have to have is you better have a good putting week. I mean, we know that, but most importantly, you better have the mid-irons dialed in, and you see that with almost every player that is showing up here. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for this week's course breakdown. Before you hopping out of here, go ahead and smash that like button for me, and also go ahead and comment down below what you've got as the winning score for this week. If you can go ahead and get that right, you'll win a free month on my Patreon page, where on there you can get access to all my projections, all my modeling for players to go out there and make some of your decisions yourself. But either way, I appreciate the support here on the channel as per usual. My guess for the winning score is going to be 18 under par. So go ahead, give me your thoughts like I said, and let's go out there and have ourselves a week.